to balance the needs of these three parties. Restorative justice is a general approach, I would say, guided by a set of values and principles. So restorative justice cannot be reduced to a technique or a method. Restorative justice is a general approach. Some will say it is a philosophy, it is a way of approaching problems. Some will even say it is a paradigm, yeah? Or it is a way of living even. Restorative justice. So a general approach, let's say, guided by a set of values and principles. And these values and principles are, roughly speaking, different from the values and the principles in the criminal justice system. Although you must nuance that difference as well, as we will see later. Now, talking about restorative justice, I mean using the term restorative justice in the European context is not always self-evident. I think in Italian it is okay to translate that. Giustizia Riparativa? Giustizia Riparativa, Restorativa, la Giustizia Reparatrice. So we in French and in Latin languages we are able to translate it, but if you try to translate it in German, I challenge you to do that, or in Finnish, or in Polish, or in Russian. So you're really struggling to find a good concept that translates restorative justice. Maybe that's not a big problem. My only warning here is that we should be aware of the fact that a lot of this literature on restorative justice is in English. It's not only about these two words, restorative justice, but many publications, as also this, sorry for that, is in English because this is the most general language and accessible language that we use in academia and in international cooperation in general. But that is also a pitfall, of course, because it can be that we take over many of these concepts and approaches from the Anglo-Saxon world. Now, restorative justice is a general approach, but of course you need models to realize that in practice. You know all the three most important models: victim-offender mediation. You know what that is, I think. Offender mediation, conferencing, I mean family group conferencing or community conferencing, I just call it conferencing. And then the third model, peacemaking circles, or sentencing circles, or healing circles. Peacemaking circles is maybe the best general wording for that. And do you know the difference between mediation, conferencing, and circles? Is that clear for you? Not really? Mm-hmm. Well, mediation is a one-to-one thing, as we have seen in the film. You have a victim, you have an offender, and a third party, the mediator. Okay? Now, conferencing is not only a victim and an offender, but victim and offender are invited to bring their support persons. Family members, friends, a good neighbor, a teacher, yeah? Support persons on both sides are present. And therefore it is much more a small conference. And the role of the mediator is there taken over by a facilitator, as is always said. Mediator or facilitator, and the principle is the same. So it is the role of the facilitator to facilitate, to make the discussion, the dialogue in this group possible. That's conferencing. Circles, in peacemaking circles or in sentencing circles, the group is even bigger. And so there, everyone is invited who is interested in the topic. Everyone from the local community or from the social community of victim and offender are welcome to join the bigger circle. And the facilitators there are managing this big group. Now, peacemaking circles sometimes do also invite the public prosecutor and the judge. And I'm talking about sentencing circles. Sentencing circles is a gathering, a meeting of a bigger group, 20, 30 people maybe, yeah, where they will not only discuss what happens and the consequences of the crime, but they will also discuss the question, what is a good reaction now from justice? should there follow now a punishment or a sanction or not? And therefore, the public prosecutor and the judge are there as well, and they listen to the people, and they can also intervene themselves. And then at the end of the day, the public prosecutor and the judge will take their own decisions still in an autonomous way. Yeah? So that are sentencing circles. But you feel what's going on there? In such a circle, a sentencing circle, the public prosecutor and the judge has the possibility to listen to the stories and to what happened in another way than we are able to do so in a court trial, where the relations are totally different, where the climate is totally different, much more in a polarizing way. So a circle, a peacemaking circle is something where everyone is equal and everyone can talk in a free way and so on. So there are many elements in common between the three models, key models of restorative justice: mediation, conferencing, and circles. Now, restorative justice, restorative practices are broader practices in criminal justice. Sometimes it is said when you work with an offender, for example in prison, you work in prison, for example. You are a social worker or a psychologist in the prison, but you set up a training, a course for the prisoners to make them more familiar with the consequences for victims in general. You do not bring them into contact maybe with their victims, or not yet, but you organize 3, 4, 5 sessions with a group of prisoners to make them more aware of the victim's side in general. That is what is called a victim awareness program. Yeah? There you do not really work with the 3 parties, you mainly work with one party, with the offender, but you try to bring in the victim dimension. So that goes into the direction of restorative justice, I would say. But it's often called a restorative practice because not all 3 parties are fully integrated or participating in an active way. But you prepare maybe their mediation or restorative justice. That is at least what we see in Belgium and in other countries when prisoners have taken part in such a victim awareness program in the prison. They ask for mediation as a next step. It happens quite often. It's not an exception. Okay? So, restorative practices, there are many restorative practices. Restorative practices is when you work with the victim or with the offender or with the community, but when you try to work into the direction of reparation in a more inclusive way, in a more general way. Restorative practices can also be set up not only in criminal justice context, but also in schools, for example, or in neighborhoods. So, there are many practices going on in European countries and also in Italy, I know for sure. Restorative practices. And restorative justice, and finally, can also be considered in a broader context, because when you apply victim-offender mediation, you need complementary practices, I think. When you bring a victim into contact with the offender, for example, you need a kind of follow-up, for example, or maybe sometimes for some victims, extra support in a psychological way for the victim, to prepare the victim, but also after the confrontation with the offender. So, and the same from the side of the offender maybe. So it means that probation workers, victim assistance workers, have to support these programs as well. Yeah? These are complementary practices, and restorative justice, according to some, implies also a kind of reorientation of the whole criminal justice system and the whole community and all the community responses. But we will come back to that. You know some of these classic definitions for sure about restorative justice. This is maybe still the most famous one by Tony Marshall from the United Kingdom. Restorative justice is an approach, a problem-solving approach to crime which involves the parties themselves and the community in an active relationship with statutory agencies. So what is said here is that when you apply mediation or conferencing, you do it usually in a kind of relationship, a kind of cooperation with the criminal justice system. Even when you do it from within an NGO or from within Caritas, for example, here. That is, I suppose, an NGO, a non-official body. Then you do it in a kind of active relationship with the justice system. It is not a particular practice, that's what I have said, but a set of principles which may orientate the general practice of any agency or group in relation to crime. And therefore, even when you are not a mediator yourself, working with victims and offenders on a daily basis and bringing them together, even when you are just a probation worker or a social worker in the prison, yeah, you can work with your clients in a restorative justice direction by discussing with them, for example, what about the victim? I have been working for years in the prison myself, before I was at university. Not for years, for 5 years. In a prison, long-term inmates in Leuven. And I was a psychologist at that moment there, and we were in a small group of social workers and psychologists and psychiatrists working with the prisoners, and we felt ourselves to be very much on the side of the prisoners. I'm talking about the 80s, the 80s, yeah? And we were not thinking, as professionals, we were not thinking at all about the victim. We tried to avoid the victim, because we were there for our offender all the time. Yeah, which is good, of course, which is perfect. But if you work about crime, I think you must also ask yourself the question, yeah, what happened to the victim? Not that you have to set up mediation immediately, but at least you must, I think, personally, be willing to start a dialogue with your offender about what's a victim in your case at a certain moment. When you have built a good relationship with your offender, then you should be able to start this kind of discussion in a respectful way to the offender. So this is what is meant here in this definition when it says that restorative justice is a set of values and principles that everyone working in the criminal justice system can use. Okay. This is another one which puts the focus a little bit more on the outcome of restorative justice. It's every action that is primarily oriented toward doing justice by repairing the harm that has been caused by a crime. The first definition that we have seen is typically more a process-oriented definition. The process of bringing people together, the dialogue, the communication is important. Here, the outcome is much more stressed. And it is an ongoing discussion in restorative justice. What is the most important? The process or the outcome, or both? I like also to refer to the work of the United Nations, and in 2002 there was a resolution from ECOSOC prepared by the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice from the United Nations in Vienna on basic principles on the use of restorative justice programs in criminal matters. This is an important document, and if you have not yet read that document, that resolution, then you should consult it. Just Google it, and you will find it immediately. Yeah? And there's, by the way, also a handbook made on the basis of this resolution. The UN handbook on restorative justice programs in criminal matters. Yeah? And there you also find in the annex of the handbook very good definitions about how do we have to understand the restorative justice program, a process and an outcome. Yeah? Okay, that was just a small introduction, but I have to go a little bit quicker, I think, now. So we will say a few words, not a few words, some words, about the development and implementation of restorative justice in European countries. Okay? I immediately start referring to a recent publication, a two-volumes book publication by Frieder Dunkel and colleagues from the University of Greifswald in Germany, where they have made an overview of the state of affairs of restorative justice in 36 European countries. That's a lot, 36 European countries. To make a study that presents the state of affairs of restorative justice in 36 European countries. And they have done that in a comparative way. So in every country they have asked an author to do that according to a common structure, a common template. to start with the history of restorative justice in your country, first pilot projects, legislation, effectiveness research, and so on. So that can be found back in that book. So if you are interested, and I show you more resources immediately, if you are interested in good, recent, reliable information about the state of affairs in a European country, or in all European countries, well, 36 European countries, then you should have a look at these two books, I think. And if you don't have them, you should order. You should ask your library, at least, to order them. But what is shown there as one of the many conclusions in this study is that in Europe, victim-offender mediation is the most important model. Victim-offender mediation, when you look at the three models, mediation, conferencing, circles, then it is all about mediation. It is present in 35 countries, the conferencing model only in 30 countries. So that's one of the many conclusions. It's not so spectacular, but it is important to know that in contradiction with many Anglo-Saxon countries, mediation is here much more developed in European countries. Yeah? If you go to Canada, to Australia, New Zealand, and other countries, the Anglo-Saxon countries, I mean, then you will see that it is all about conferencing. Although we also have mediation programs, of course. Okay? So, there is legislation in European countries on restorative justice in almost every European Union, that are around 28 until now, still 28 member states. The fact that there is legislation in almost every member state of the European Union, formal legislation, does not mean that restorative justice is applied very much. So in a general way, the legislation plays a limited role in the real implementation of restorative justice. Some other lessons are the following. I'm still talking about that study from Greifswald. So there are 5 countries where victim offender mediation is functioning as a general service. It means 5 countries where victim offender mediation in all the country, in all places of the country is available for all types of offenses, whether these are minor offenses or very serious offenses, and at all stages of the criminal justice process. So there are 5 countries where it is in a general way available in that sense, but they all started from a victim-oriented perspective. And later it will become clear why that is so, I think. There are 7 countries that have restorative justice available in a nationwide network with decent caseloads. So not just a couple of hundred caseloads, but thousands of cases every year. So there are 7 countries where in Europe where you can say, well, it is really a very general practice available for everyone, well organized. Many cases are dealt with in the whole country. Well, in these 7 countries, if you analyze them, it is remarkable to see that restorative justice there started all bottom up. It was not the Minister of Justice at a certain moment who took the initiative to adopt a law and to start mediation in the whole country. It were small NGOs, local services, always, that started pilot projects, and then they were implemented in other places of the country, and then finally it became a big movement in the country. And at a certain moment there was strong legislation in that country to establish really these programs of restorative justice. So it means that it might make sense, I think, to build restorative justice in a gradual way, step by step. Because I think it is important to have good cooperation and good relationships of all people involved at the local level. You cannot set up these programs in an isolated way. You need a lot of partners and cooperation, other organizations, including the police maybe, information services, victim support organizations, the public prosecutor, the juvenile judge, the prisons, and so on. Okay. That is important. What we see now, what we have seen the last 10, 15 years, in some Central and East European countries is that they have adopted mediation legislation very quickly. Certainly under pressure of the European Union, because they became member states or candidate member states, and they had to comply with all the legislation of the European Union in a couple of years. And they had to reform their criminal justice system as well. And therefore, they very quickly started implementing these kind of things, but that did not work very well, because it was not prepared on the basis. I've already been talking about the European Union, about the United Nations, but also the Council of Europe in Europe has been very important. So the Council of Europe has actively promoted since the 80s mediation programs. From their regulations, recommendations. The Council of Europe is famous for its recommendations on prisons, on alternative sanctions, on victims. And there you see that there is often space also for mediation within these existing recommendations on victims and on offenders. There's also the recommendation of 99 of the Council of Europe on penal mediation. And as is the case with the United Nations resolution of 2002, this recommendation from the Council of Europe, closer to us, of 99, is very important as well. Because there, in this recommendation, you can find again good definitions, but also good working principles on how should we set up mediation programs when we start these things. I also invite you to have a look at this recommendation of the Council of Europe. But there, for example, is mentioned that mediation should be a generally available service. It should be a service.